What's up guys, Nathan here. Welcome to another set review. This is the white set review for the Final Fantasy MTG set, which is going to be released on June 13th, 2025. As usual, I will be making a set review for all of the colors, white, blue, black, red, and green in that order. So make sure to check out the other color set reviews if you're interested in them. As well, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, subscribe if you want to see more, and if you want to support me in my turn, you can check out my Patreon linked down below. With that out of the way, let's hop into our first card here with Ishgard, the Holy Sea, which is going to be an adventure land that you can cast on the adventure side and also play the land later. For 5 mana, we can return up to 2 target artifact and or enchantment cards from our graveyard to our hand, which looks a lot like Lorien Revealed, which is a awesome bar to meet. To be honest, Lorien Revealed, I auto-include into any blue deck. I don't think Ishgard is necessarily an auto-include into any white deck. I think you need to be probably artifact or enchantment heavy. I'd say you'd want at least 15 or more artifacts and enchantments in your deck before you'd start giving this a look, because tapped land slots are at a premium in 2025 Commander, I think that most decks honestly want less than 9 or 8 tapped lands, and we've already got a lot of really powerful MDFCs that are already taking those slots, like your Bala Ged Recoveries or things like that, or your Lorien Revealeds, of course. But I think that if you meet that stipulation, I think Ishgard is going to be a shoe-in for a tapped land slot, and perhaps you might even give up a Surveil land, perhaps to run Ishgard, given that it can be a better late game draw. So Ishgard is going to be the most popular white card from the set, bar none. I think we'll just go ahead and get that out of the way now. And in fact, I did factor that into our top 3 white cards that we'll be going over at the end of the video, just because it's going to just be the most popular card, and that's just boring. So let's talk about some commanders where that might want this card. Anixia, Hand of Erebos, is an enchantment graveyard deck, which will obviously want Ishgard to get some enchantments from the graveyard to the hand, and Osgir also fills its graveyard with artifacts, which would be giving this card a heavy look into its mana base. Next up here, we have Cloud Midgar Mercenary, which is a tutor for an equipment card. Put it into your hand, and then if it's equipped, it will double the equipment triggers that is equipped to Cloud, and it is a 2/1 human soldier mercenary. I will say the creature type here is also pretty good. Humans and soldiers are great for if you're considering any sort of human soldier tribal deck. They also tend to run equipment decks as well. So the going rate for equipment tutors is about 1 mana. We know that with Steel Shaper's Gift. And so if we're getting a 2/1 body that doubles equipment triggers for only 1 additional mana, that's kind of insane, especially considering the fact that this is a creature and can be reanimated or flickered or anything like that. So Cloud is just incredibly efficient for what it does. I think this is going to be the new sort of power creep going forward here. We just get a 2/1 body that does everything in the world for only 2 mana. And I do have Roaming Throne just as a comparison here, because we don't necessarily have anything that can like double the equipment triggers. This is, I believe Cloud is the first card to actually do that, but Roaming Throne is sort of a similar trigger copying effect here. So Cloud, the double white pips might hold it back in 3 to 4 color decks and 5 color decks, but honestly, I think this guy will be found in a lot of decks, and I think this is going to be one of the most played cards from the set as well. As for the commanders that will want Cloud in their 99, we have examples such as Arden, Intrepid Archaeologist, which is typically paired up with another partner commander like Rograk, typically running a Boros equipment shell around that. Arden is arguably the most powerful Voltron commander in the format, but I might be a little bit biased as somebody that has built an Arden Intrepid Archaeologist deck and does maintain it. Captain America as well is also a super popular equipment commander, which will absolutely love having Cloud Midgar Mercenary in its 99, and what an IB crossover there, ladies and gentlemen. Next, we move on to Summoner Sending, which is a 2-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature card from a graveyard. If you do, create a 1/1 white spirit with flying. That's important. Put a 1/1 counter on it if the card's mana value is 4 or greater. Now, currently, in looking at the options out there that make a spirit every turn, Spirit Bonds is sort of the best example, I believe, but that forces you to pay mana to create spirit creature tokens with flying. Court of Grace will make you a spirit if you don't have the Monarch on your upkeep. So I really like how Summoner Sending is just incidentally hating on graveyards, but we're mostly playing it for the spirit token creation every single turn. And I think that if you already are playing Spirit Bonds, Summoner Sending will edge out Spirit Bonds as being a just a straight upgrade, arguably. arguably. So then the commanders that will want Summoner Ascending are Millicent, which I also have a spirit deck with Millicent, so a little bit biased there. Really love Millicent as a spirit commander, and you can also run King of the Oathbreakers, which I kind of am curious about. I do kind of want to build a deck around King of the Oathbreakers because I do like the idea of just permanently protecting your board, phasing on all of your creatures so that you can never be board wiped, and just slowly building up an army there. So definitely any spirit commander wants Summoner Ascending in the 99. Then let's move to From Father to Son, which is a 2-mana vehicle tutor, and we can also flash it back to put that vehicle onto the battlefield. So we don't really have just a straight 2-mana vehicle tutor at the moment. The closest comparison I can find would be like Caradora, which for 4 mana in Selesnya colors, we can search up a mount or vehicle card. And just to show you guys kind of the going rate, again, we have that Steel Shaper's Gift. 1 mana searches up an equipment card. So it is nice that we're getting a little bit more efficient options to search up vehicles and just getting more vehicle support into the format, which I do appreciate as a vehicle builder myself. And if you haven't already checked out, I did make a Stand Paranoid Partisan vehicle deck tech, which I think is actually arguably the second best commander for vehicles. Greasefang, of course, being number 1, but Greasefang is a little bit boring and is susceptible to kind of being a glass cannon if you remove Greasefang. So if you're looking for more of a rampy style vehicle commander deck, check out my Stand Paranoid Partisan deck tech. I promise you won't be disappointed, but From Father to Son will be making its way into that deck for sure. Then we have Sade Free Flyer Pilot, more support for vehicles, and also equipment spells, because it says equipment and vehicle spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and we can pay 2 tap and return target equipment or vehicle card from your graveyard to your hand. So a nice bit of card advantage stapled onto mana advantage. And of course, we have the same commander examples here. Again, Sten for those vehicles, and then Arden for those equipment. I think this is just a good stuff card. I don't know why you wouldn't put this in a vehicle or equipment style of deck, because it is, again, stapling mana advantage and card advantage onto one card. And whenever that happens in Commander, it's just always a good time. Then we move on to Alice Leveler, which is going to be pronounced Leveler for my non-French speaking simplification here. 3 mana 3/2 Elf Wizard. It partners with Alphinaud Leveler. It has first strike and the second spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. So I look at this as sort of like a Worn Power Stone on a creature, which I think is incredibly solid. We don't really have in mono white, that is, any card that says the second spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. We'd have examples like Monk Class, which does reduce our spells by 1, but you have to be in Azorius colors, and it's only 2 mana to reduce our spells by 1. I'd much rather pay 3 and then reduce a second spell by 2. I think that's just a better rate. So notwithstanding the fact that Alice also gives you a card into your hand if you are in the colors with Alphinaud, I think this is just going to be an incredibly solid option, and it's going to staple, again, mana advantage and card advantage on the same spell, and it's going to just make you basically 2 mana every single turn afterwards, assuming that you can double spell every single turn. So this is going to be an incredible 3 mana ramp piece, and it does have that elf creature type if you are in an elf deck that does have white in it. Then we move on to the best 3 mana rock, in quotes. Side Quest Catch a Fish is a 3 mana enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's an artifact or creature card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you put a card into your hand this way, create a food token and transform this enchantment into a land. Now, we don't care about what the activated ability is on the land, but the important part about this is that we can draw a creature card, which most white decks are creature decks in some fashion, assuming that you're not running a bunch of non-creatures in order to create a bunch of tokens. The fact that this will draw us a creature card and then immediately transform into a land, so therefore I think of this almost as like a 3 mana rock, almost like just a better version of Commander Sphere, because we don't need to sacrifice this thing. Or I guess you could compare it to the Celestis as well, which is a little bit more card selection rather than card advantage. Assuming that you hit the creature card on your first draw, and if you are like a 45 to 50 creature card deck, in my opinion, this is like an instant slam if you're not in green, because you get both mana and card advantage on the same card. So we're seeing a recurring theme here with all of this Final Fantasy power creep. Now, the assumption here is that you actually hit the creature card off the top. There's a good chance that you might, hit a land or something like that, but we do have some creature MDFC lands, which also will count. So I think that this card is going to hit on the very first turn that you actually get that trigger, probably 1 out of every 2 times. So even if you assume that it won't become a mana rock until turn, I don't know, 5, I think this is still pretty decent. And I think you should just give this a look if you're in any sort of creature heavy deck, artifact heavy deck, or perhaps even a food deck. Very flavorful there. Then next we move to the Wind Crystal. 4 mana white spells you cast, cost 1 less to cast. If you gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. And then 6 mana tap, creature control gain flying and lifelink until end of turn. Now I don't think we'll be activating that activated ability very much. This is sort of like a Pearl Medallion stapled to a Rock's Faith Mender. So I think that this card has a very high density. And what I mean by that is that it does a lot on one card, but the fact that it is 4 mana, I think, is killing this card, because if you're playing it for the ramp side, then it's not that good of a ramp piece because it comes down on turn 4, maybe even turn 3 if you had a 2 mana ramp spell in the very beginning. I will say it is an artifact, so it can be reduced by your artifact reducers like your Stand Paranoid Partisan or whatever, or the other 2 mana blue enchantment artifact rather that I can't think of at the moment, but I'll have up on screen. And of course it will double your life gain. So it is sort of a combo piece in those life gain type of decks. But even if you're in life gain, I don't know if I would necessarily run this, just because it's just too late if you're going to take advantage of that ramp side. It's kind of a 4 mana do nothing artifact the turn it comes down. And if we look at kind of the math here, so if we assume that Pearl Medallion is played on turn 2, which is that top bar, we can see that, well, by turn 3 it will produce us 1 mana. Now if we look at our assumptions here, assuming that we'll double spell on turn 5 and after, and then triple spell on turn 8 and after, the mana advantage granted by Pearl Medallion over the Wind Crystal here, you can see, leads to a -3 advantage, or I should say a 3 mana advantage for Pearl Medallion by turn 9. Now, consequently, with the Wind Crystal coming down on turn 4 and not even producing mana until turn 5, and that's even assuming we can start double spelling by turn 5, then it will only produce us 12 mana by turn 9. So the difference here is pretty stark, and I think that Pearl Medallion is just one of the best cards to see in your opener. Whereas if you have, if you're on 3 lands and you're not drawing your 4th land, I feel like the Wind Crystal just doesn't bail you out of those early game scenarios. So I'm a little bit low on it, even with the activated ability there. I would only consider this in a very heavy life gain deck, and even then it would be more of like a combo piece. Next up here we have Summon Yojimbo, 4 mana 5/5 Vigilance, Saga Samurai, exile target artifact, enchantment, or tap creature an opponent controls, and then we get a nice propaganda effect, or rather ghostly prison effect, on chapters 2 and 3, and then chapter 4 we don't really care about because we're not really going to get it. What you want to be doing with this card is to either flicker it or manipulate those Saga counters. I don't think the treasure ability is that good, and we don't really want to trigger that anyway, because what we want to be doing is resetting this back to chapter 1 and chapter 2 constantly. So if you're in any sort of Saga deck with counter manipulation, give Summon Yojimbo a look, because constantly exiling artifacts, enchantments, and tapped creatures I think is an excellent thing to be doing in Commander, or I guess you could just flicker this as well. And of course for commanders that might want this would be like a Brago deck, which can exile and flicker any number of non-land permanents, not just creatures, or something like a Tam, which is going to be manipulating counters on permanents you control. Next, we will talk about Dion Bahamut's Dominant, which on its backside flips to a Saga. Dion is a 4 mana 3/3 that makes a 2/2 knight creature token. It itself is a human noble knight. During your turn, Dion and other knights you control have flying, and we can pay 6 mana to transform it into Bahamut, which I don't think is quite powerful. For 6 mana, it's really not worth it that much. What I would rather focus on is the front side here, because at its very minimum, Dion will come in as a 3/3 flyer because it gives itself flying as well, and also creates a 2/2 flyer. So for 4 mana, that's pretty decent, especially the fact that Knight tribal decks typically want to be going wide so that they can make use of cards like Banner of Kinship and things like that. So I think this is just custom made for Sidar Jabari or any sort of Knight tribal deck. I will definitely be slotting this into my personal Sidar Jabari deck, and I think that this is just going to be be excellent because it will always give knights you control flying and give you that evasion to actually swing out towards your opponents. And it has just a nice late game sort of emergency mode button if you want to buff up your creatures. Now the 1/1 counter is not particularly powerful and it's very slow, so I'm not really sure if that's quite a game ender for 6 mana, but it is an interesting ability to activate in late game if you have nothing else to do. Chocobo Knights, which is a 4 mana 3/3 human knight, for some reason is not a bird, even though the Chocobo birds are featured in the art, and it's in the name as well. So I think this is a little bit of a miss here with the creature typing, but anyway, it is a human knight, 2 very relevant creature types. Whenever you attack, creatures you control with counters on them gain double strike until end of turn. So this card is okay. I think it's about on rate for a 4 mana double strike giver with some stipulation for the creatures that you're trying to give double strike. Kinsale Cavalier will give double strike to knights you control. Blade Historian will give attacking creatures double strike. I think Blade Historian is the best here, but you do have to be in Boros colors. So I suppose if you're in any sort of Saga creature deck, like a Terra Magical Adept deck, or any sort of 1/1 counter deck, Atraxa decks, might give Chocobo Knights a look, but I will say this slot is particularly competitive. If you're looking for finishers or any sort of double strike givers, you're going to find a lot of competition in that slot. And moving on here, we have Champions from Beyond, X and 2 white. When this enchantment enters, create X 1 colorless hero creature tokens. When you attack with 4 more creatures, scry 2, then draw a card. And whenever you attack with 8 more creatures, the creatures get +4/+4 until end of turn. Absolutely stellar effect here. Also do love the art. So this is sort of like a Jetmir Nexus of Revels combined with a Grand Crescendo stapled onto 1 card. And it is an enchantment that sticks around, so you constantly get these excellent attack triggers if you have those enough creatures to trigger them. So I think that this is honestly a really excellent card and will find its way into almost every token deck. Of course, every time there's an attack trigger, we have to ask ourselves, does it go into Ishgard? And of course, this goes into an Ishgard deck. I think this might nudge out, I believe it's called Fervent Charge, the Mardu enchantment that will give attacking creatures +2/+0, I believe. I don't know, I'll have that up on the screen here. But Ishgard will definitely want this deck because Ishgard decks typically tend to go wide, having attack triggers where you're making tokens and things. I will say it could be a bit of a nombo because if you have an attack trigger on a creature with Ishgard out and you attack and that creature makes a token, I believe Champions from Beyond will not trigger if you don't meet the stipulation before you attack, because it will have to say whenever you attack, you'd have to be attacking with those creatures in order to get Champions from Beyond to trigger. So just be aware of that. But I think either way, the +4/+4 is absolutely excellent. And if you're in any sort of token deck, Balin the Haymaker might give this a good look. So being a creature token maker and an overrun on the same card is just going to be an absolute excellent combination. And I think that, again, we're seeing more cards with higher density of effects. And I think that that's going to be sort of the next era of power creep, with Final Fantasy and beyond, is that Wizards of the Coast might not be reducing certain effects by mana, although the Traveling Chocobo is the one exception to that rule, with Ancient Green Warden being a 6 mana effect compared to Traveling Chocobo being only 3. Kind of crazy there. But my point here is that we can basically keep cards costed at the same mana, but just add more effects. And I think that Champions from Beyond is a perfect example of how they're just stacking more lines of text for a similar mana cost. And I will say, Champions from Beyond, happy to cast it for only 2 mana to get that big overrun effect. So this is going to be an absolutely excellent card in any token deck or attacking matters deck. Next up here, we have Delivery Moogle. We can tutor up an artifact card with mana value 2 or less and put it into our hand, which is pretty awesome. This is basically just a tribute mage on a mono white card. It is a 3/2 flyer as well. So I don't think that this is as efficient as a tribute mage, but it is very versatile because it can go find things like Skull Clamp, your super powerful artifacts in your deck. For example, Ozolith the Shadowed Spire, if you're in green, it's going to find your key artifact pieces, and therefore I think it's just splashable in so many decks that want powerful artifacts to put into their hand. And as a result, I think this is going to be a very, very popular card from the set as well. And up next, we move to Ultima, which is a 5-mana sorcery, destroy all artifacts and creatures end the turn, which means all of those dice triggers are exiled from the stack in addition to Ultima itself. Now, Ultima is important for standard, I think, but in Commander, we already have options like Sunfall and Farewell, and I think that as time goes on in Commander, I look more and more for effects that will just exile all creatures or be some sort of one-sided board wipe. I'm not sure that I'm interested in a destroy-based board wipe that just prevents dice triggers from happening. In that case, I'd rather just exile all creatures to get to prevent all of those dice triggers from happening, on top of preventing those cards from going to the opponent's graveyard. So I think Sunfall clearly better than Ultima. There's also like Starfall Invocation that I'd probably run over Ultima as well, because you can actually just have your commander be the only card on the battlefield, being that Starfall Invocation has to resolve before anybody can respond. So your commander can actually go to the graveyard, then be reanimated with Starfall Invocation without anybody interacting with it, which is very cool. So I don't know. I guess Ultima is sort of a meta call here, but it is another option if you want to really hose like Aristocrats decks. Then we move to Mughal's Valor. 5-mana instant for each creature you control. Create a 1/2 Mughal creature with lifelink. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Again, we are seeing a higher density of effects stapled onto one card. For 5 mana, this is a little bit expensive. Second Harvest is only 4 mana and does double your creature tokens. And I do have another example here being Grand Crescendo. Gives you that indestructible until end of turn. So Mughal's Valor kind of combines the two into just a creature doubler. And I think it's important because those creatures do have lifelink, so if you do buff them with something like a Banner of Kinship or any sort of like Creative of Behemoth, you're going to be gaining a ton of life to survive the crackback. So I think Mughal's Valor is going to be another great option for your token decks or any sort of Mughal deck. Mog Mughal Warrior is a new Mughal commander we got in the set as well, or any sort of big token go wide decks such as Jetmir Nexus of Rebels might want Mughal's Valor. And then we move to Minwu White Mage. Whenever you gain life, put a 1 counter on each creature, or I'm sorry, each cleric you control, 3/3 Vigilance lifelink for 5 mana. So this is an Archangel of Thune, but just for clerics, and we all know how powerful Archangel of Thune is. If you're any sort of life gain deck, it is simply the best overrun to see in your hand. So I think that this will fit into all of your cleric decks, all of your go-wide cleric decks. Ravos, Timna will want this card for sure. Also, that art is pretty awesome. Next, we move to Summon Knights of Round, 8 mana 3/3 Indestructible Saga Knight. It has 5 chapters because the animation in Final Fantasy for this particular summon is like a minute and a half. Absolutely insane to have to sit through a minute and a half animation every time you want to use a spell. Anyway, chapters 1 through 4 will create 3 2/2 white knight creature tokens, and then it will give you an overrun at chapter 5 and an indestructible counter onto those knight creatures. And it itself is indestructible, which I think is very much needed, because if this were to not have indestructible or any sort of, well, it'd be nice if it had ward as well. But given that, Swords to Plowshares is one of the most powerful removal spells in the format. But I think that this is just custom made again for your knight decks. Knight Tribal getting massive upgrades here. Sidar Jabari going to be an insta slam into the 99 there, because it can be reanimated and create just a huge board out of nowhere. And then an interesting bit of synergy here with Arna Kennerud. Specifically says whenever modifier creature you control attacks, double the number of each kind of counter on it. So with Summon Knights of Round, if you are in like a Knight Tribal deck with Arna on the battlefield, it will actually allow you to speed run through the lore counters, which is really neat, and get to that big overrun effect sooner. And then we will move to our honorable mentions for the white cards from the Final Fantasy set. We have Protection Magic. For 2 mana, we get an instant, put a shield counter on each of up to 3 target creatures. This is an honorable mention because it's competing with protection effects that typically will completely save your creatures. So I have a Shelter as an example here, which will actually cantrip you and just replace itself. But you also have things like Galadriel's Dismissal, Parting Gust, I believe it's called, which is either a removal spell or a protection spell, which will flicker a creature. So Protection Magic, I think you have to really have high value targets for the shield counters or be manipulating the shield counters in some way. So if you had like an Atraxa on the battlefield with like a bristly bill, and then maybe like another high value creature, something that will need to stay in the battlefield in order to get value over time, maybe you might want to give protection magic a look. It doesn't replace itself, which is kind of a bummer. I think that this will be better off if it only distributed like 2 shield counters and then drew a card or something like that. Then we'd be talking, but I think just because it is only 3 shield counters and that's it, I don't know if this will see a lot of play, but it is the first time we have seen a spell that will just distribute multiple shield counters, which I think is very cool, and thus makes it into the honorable mentions. Next, we have Gata and Lazu, a 3-mana 1/1 flash. When introduced to a creature you control, if damage will be dealt to that creature this turn, prevent that damage and put that many 1/1 counters on it. So this is just a straight upgrade from Selfless Squire, because Selfless Squire gives itself the counters, whereas Gata and Lazu will put the counters on the thing you are protecting, which I think is better. Next, we have High Digger, I believe, Shinra Executive, 4-mana 3/3 at the beginning of combat your turn. Target creature control gets +X/+0 until end of turn. X is the number of soldiers you control. At the beginning of your end step, create a number of 1/1 white soldier creature tokens equal to the number of opponents who control more creatures than you. This is an honorable mention because I think that soldier tribal decks typically want to go wide, and so you're better off with something like a Hero of Blade Hold that will always be buffing your creatures and making those soldier tokens regardless of how many creatures you have. Typically, soldier decks want to be going wide, so you're going to have more creatures than your opponents. So therefore, I just don't know how often that second clause is going to trigger, and therefore Heidegger is an honorable mention. And that will take us to Summon Good King Mog, the 12 for a 5-mana 4/4 flying lifelink. Create 2 white 1/2 white Moogle creature tokens with lifelink. And then I think chapter 2 and 3 are the most important. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell this turn, create a token that's a copy of target non-saga token you control, and then it will buff your Moogles for that last chapter. So if you are casting non-creature spells that make tokens, I think this is an interesting option for you. It does exclude sagas itself, so you can't pull like the Caretaker's Talent, like make a token copy of itself and then start copying itself, and then just copy your copies, and you know it won't get out of hand that way. But I was trying to think of like non-creature spells that make valuable tokens, and I was thinking like Fable of the Mirror Breaker does make that Goblin Shaman token, which could be valuable. So again, if you're in some sort of like counter manipulation deck, that you might want to give this a look, or any sort of deck with like Nesting Dovehawk that will be populating valuable creatures. And then that will finally wrap us up and take us to our top 3 white cards from the entire set. And if we get a drum roll, please, we have Delivery Moogle, Cloud Midgar Mercenary, and Champions from Beyond, with the caveat that Ishgard is going to be the most popular card from the set, but we need to ignore that because that's boring. Delivery Moogle, I think, is going to be searching up all of your most valuable artifacts and putting them into your hand. It is only very splashable, I should say, at only 1 white pip. Kind of insane there. I think it's a little bit below rate compared to Tribute Mage, but if you're in a deck that wants to search up specific artifacts, my gosh, is Delivery Moogle just an insta-slam into your 99. Cloud Midgar Mercenary is one of the most efficient equipment tutors we have ever seen on a card, and therefore I think it's going to be seeing a lot of play. I don't know why you wouldn't run this in any equipment deck. It's just absolutely insane. And then Champions from Beyond is going to go into most, if not all, token decks and attacking matters decks. I think that you're going to be creating tokens, drawing cards, and buffing up your creatures, and that's like exactly what you want to be doing in a token go wide deck. So I think that all these are incredibly solid cards. We've seen some massive power creep from the set, and I think that's part of the hype for Final Fantasy, is that we get yet another Modern Horizons 3-esque set where we're just seeing power creep all over the place. But the good thing, I think, is that we've only seen a couple of really generic includes for almost all decks. So something like a Delivery Moogle is going to find its way into many, many homes. But I will say that most of these options, or most of these best cards from the set, are in more niche decks. So Cloud, obviously gotta be an equipment deck. Champions from Beyond, gotta be in a token deck. So I do like the fact that these are a little bit limited and we're not seeing just generic staples all over the place. But with that, that will wrap up the video, guys. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, always appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to see more of my set reviews. And if you want to support me and my channel, you can check out my Patreon linked down below. With that, I'll wrap up the video, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next one.